Have you ever truly considered how profoundly one civilization can shape our world, even millennia after its perceived fall? Imagine an empire so vast, so influential, that its very name still reverberates through our languages, our laws, our architecture, and even our deepest dreams. An empire that birthed gods, kings, warriors, and philosophers. One that witnessed earth-shattering wars, bloody rebellions, and reforms that shifted the very foundations of an era. Rome. Just a single word, yet it encapsulates an entire universe of history, glory, and tragedy. Did you know that the story of Rome began not with historical certainty, but with a myth of abandoned twins nurtured by a she-wolf? Or that some of its greatest wars were decided by Pyrrhic victories, where winning felt like losing, and its most devastating defeats somehow never broke its will? Can you picture a city that started as little more than thatched huts, growing to become the heart of an empire, spanning 3 continents home to millions? And could you ever believe that even when the Western Empire crumbled, the idea of Rome lived on, shaping kingdoms, religions, and legal systems for centuries to come? Tonight we're embarking on a unique journey, a passage through time that will delve into every era, every event, every figure that forged the epic saga of the Roman Empire. From its mythical beginnings on the Palatine Hill through the birth of a resilient republic, the rise of a mighty empire, periods of tumultuous crisis and miraculous recovery, to the eventual division and the final fading of the West, but never the true end of Rome's enduring legacy. Let our voices guide you through the cobbled streets, the echoing arenas, the libraries brimming with knowledge, and the courts where power was forged. Close your eyes or let the gentle glow of your screen lull you as your mind traverses over 2 millennia of history. This isn't just a history lesson, it's an experience, an immersive adventure you won't soon forget. So get ready, because the story of Rome awaits. Drift off to sleep to the entire history of the Roman Empire. The tale of Rome's birth is shrouded in the mists of myth and legend, far more poetic than any dry historical account. It begins not with certainty, but with the dramatic story of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. Born to Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, and the god Mars himself, these divine children faced a perilous start. Fearing their potentially dangerous lineage, a jealous king ordered them drowned in the Tiber River. But destiny, it seems, had other plans. The river, perhaps sensing their future, carried them gently downstream, where they washed ashore at the very spot that would one day become Rome. There, a she-wolf, guided by instinct or divine will, discovered the abandoned infants, nurturing them with her own milk. Later, a shepherd named Faustulus found them, and with his wife raised them as their own sons. As Romulus and Remus grew into strong, ambitious young men, they learned of their royal heritage. Inspired by their miraculous survival and their connection to the land, they decided to establish a new settlement on the banks where they had been saved. But creation often brings conflict. A bitter quarrel erupted between the brothers over the precise location and leadership of their new city. In a moment that would resonate throughout Roman history, Romulus, fueled by ambition and perhaps a touch of divine madness, killed Remus. Thus Romulus became the sole founder of this nascent community. Standing atop what would later be called the Palatine Hill, he ceremoniously marked the boundaries of his new city, with a plow in the year we now call 753 BCE. This date would become the foundational anchor from which Romans would later measure their entire history. The early settlement of Rome was far from the grand marble metropolis we often imagine. It was little more than a collection of thatched huts nestled along the Tiber, surrounded by more powerful Etruscan cities to the north and well-established Greek colonies to the south. To strengthen his struggling community, Romulus, with remarkable foresight, offered asylum to outlaws, exiles, and refugees from surrounding areas. This bold move rapidly swelled the population, but it also created an immediate glaring problem: a severe shortage of women. Romulus, ever the pragmatist, solved this dilemma through a daring and controversial episode known as the Rape of the Sabine Women. He invited the neighboring Sabines to a grand festival, and then amidst the revelry his men abducted their daughters as brides for Roman men. This act, though initially leading to conflict, ultimately resulted in the peaceful assimilation of the Sabines, further diversifying and strengthening Rome's foundational population. For nearly 2.5 centuries after Romulus, Rome was ruled by a succession of kings. 7 monarchs in total are traditionally credited with guiding the early city's development, slowly transforming it from a humble village into a significant regional power. Each king left his own unique mark, contributing to the religious, social, and military fabric of what would become a formidable civilization. After Romulus came Numa Pompilius, remembered as a wise and pious ruler. Unlike his warlike predecessor, Numa focused on establishing many of Rome's religious traditions and institutions. He created the crucial position of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, and established the Temple of Janus, whose doors would be closed only in times of peace, a rare occurrence in the annals of Roman history. Numa's emphasis on spiritual foundations provided Rome with a cohesive religious identity, believed to ensure the Pax Deorum, or peace with the gods, essential for the city's prosperity. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, was a stark contrast to Numa, embodying a return to the more aggressive martial spirit of Romulus. He dramatically expanded Roman territory through warfare, most notably against the neighboring city of Alba Longa, Rome's ancestral mother city. Under his rule, Rome absorbed the Alban population after their defeat, establishing a pattern of assimilation that would serve Rome remarkably well throughout its history. This period also saw the famous combat between the Hieraci and Curiatae triplets, representing Rome and Alba Longa, respectively, a symbolic battle that decided the fate of both cities without a full-scale war, showcasing an early Roman flair for strategic resolution. Next, Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, focused on infrastructure and defense. He constructed Rome's first bridge across the Tiber, an essential link for trade and communication. He also founded the Crucio port city of Ostia at the river's mouth, opening vital trade routes that would eventually connect Rome to the wider Mediterranean world. Ancus expanded the city's boundaries to include the Janiculum Hill, providing better defensive positions for the growing settlement. With the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, Etruscan influence became increasingly prominent in Roman culture and governance. Tarquinius initiated the construction of some of Rome's most enduring public works. He began the massive Great Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, a testament to Roman power and religious devotion, and expanded the Circus Maximus, for chariot races demonstrating Rome's growing appetite for grand public spectacles. The gargantuan drainage project of the Cloaca Maxima also began under his rule, a monumental feat of engineering that transformed the swampy valley between the hills into what would eventually become the vibrant Roman Forum, the heart of Roman public life. Servius Tullius, the sixth king, is credited with implementing Rome's first constitution. He ingeniously divided citizens into classes based on wealth and military capability, creating the centuriate assembly. This ingenious organization, which linked civic duty to military service and economic standing, would remain fundamental to Roman military and political life for centuries. Servius also oversaw the construction of the first defensive wall around the entire city, encompassing the famous 7 hills of Rome, the Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Caelian. These walls not only provided physical protection, but also solidified Rome's identity as a cohesive urban entity. The final king, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, marked a dark turn for the monarchy. His reign was characterized by tyranny and cruelty. While he did oversee impressive building projects, including the completion of the Temple of Jupiter, his arrogance and oppressive rule deeply alienated the Roman nobility. The breaking point came with the infamous act of his son Sextus Tarquinius, who raped Lucretia, a virtuous Roman noblewoman. This outrage, a symbol of royal abuse and moral decay, provoked a powerful rebellion. Led by Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's husband Collatinus, the Roman people rose up. In 509 BCE, the monarchy was overthrown. Tarquin and his family fled into exile, and the Roman Republic, a bold new experiment in governance designed to prevent the concentration of power in any single individual, was born. This foundational shift would not only shape Rome's future, but would influence political thought for millennia to come. The overthrow of Tarquin the Proud in 509 BCE marked a watershed moment in Roman history, the birth of the Roman Republic. This new system of government was a radical departure from monarchy, intentionally designed to prevent the concentration of power that had led to tyranny. In place of a single king, Rome now appointed 2 annually elected magistrates called consuls. Each consul possessed the power to veto the decisions of the other, a built-in check and balance intended to ensure that no single person could dominate Roman politics. Behind these consuls stood the Senate, a council of elders drawn from noble patrician families. While the Senate initially lacked formal legislative power, its advice carried enormous weight, effectively guiding policy controlling state finances and overseeing foreign affairs. Complementing these were various assemblies, most notably the Centuriate Assembly, which voted on war and peace and elected the consuls, and the Tribal Assembly. The early republic, however, was far from a harmonious democracy. It faced immediate and pressing threats, both internal and external. The exiled King Tarquin sought allies among neighboring cities, leading to early conflicts. The powerful Etruscan lord Lars Porsena even besieged Rome, and according to legend, the heroic Horatius Cocles single-handedly held a bridge against the Etruscan army, while his comrades destroyed it behind him, saving the city from capture. But Rome's internal politics proved as challenging as its external enemies. The Republic was initially dominated by the patricians of the hereditary noble class, who controlled both political and religious institutions. The vast majority of citizens, known as the plebeians, found themselves largely excluded from power and often trapped in debt bondage to patrician landowners. This fundamental tension between the orders would shape Roman politics for centuries. The first major social crisis, known as the conflict of the orders, came when plebeian soldiers, the very backbone of Rome's military might, withdrew from the city to the Sacred Mount in history's first recorded general strike. This drastic action forced the patricians to concede. The result was the creation of the office of Tribune of the Plebs magistrates, who could veto legislation harmful to plebeian interests. Tribunes were declared sacrosanct, meaning anyone who harmed them faced religious condemnation and death, giving them unparalleled protection and influence. The next significant development came with the creation of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written law code posted in the Forum for all to see around 450 BCE. These laws brought transparency to what had been secretive legal procedures controlled by patricians, and while still favoring the elite. In many respects, the 12 Tables represented a crucial step toward greater equality under the law and established the principle that laws should be public knowledge. Over the following decades, through continued struggle, the plebeians gradually gained access to all major magistracies and religious offices, fundamentally altering the nature of Roman governance. As Rome resolved these internal challenges, it gradually expanded its influence throughout central Italy. The city fought numerous wars against neighboring peoples, including the Volsci Aequi and Sabines. Most significantly, Rome clashed repeatedly with the Etruscans. The conquest of the wealthy Etruscan city of Veii, just 12 miles to the north, dramatically doubled the territory under Roman control and demonstrated Rome's growing military prowess. However, this expansion faced a devastating setback when Celtic Gauls migrating from across the Alps inflicted a crushing defeat on the Roman army at the Allia River in 390 BCE and proceeded to sack Rome itself. Most of the city was destroyed, though a small group of defenders bravely held out on the Capitoline Hill. According to legend, sacred geese in the Temple of Juno warned the Romans of a night attack, saving the citadel. The Gauls eventually withdrew after receiving a ransom of gold, but the traumatic memory of this disaster would remain a deep scar in Roman consciousness for centuries. Remarkably, Rome rebounded swiftly from this catastrophe. The city was rebuilt, and stronger walls were constructed. Within decades, Rome had defeated the Latin League, incorporating these related peoples into its growing state. Some Latin communities received full Roman citizenship, while others gained partial rights, establishing innovative patterns of graduated citizenship and alliances that would become a hallmark of Roman statecraft. This flexible system of integration, offering incentives for loyalty and providing manpower, would prove invaluable in Rome's future conquests. The middle years of the Republic saw significant political reforms. The Licinian Sextian laws in 367 BCE required that one consul must be a plebeian, finally opening the highest office to non-patricians. Over subsequent decades, plebeians gained access to all major magistracies and religious offices. While wealth rather than birth increasingly determined political opportunity, this process of social integration helped Rome avoid the destructive class conflicts that plagued many Greek city-states. Rome's growing power inevitably brought it into conflict with other regional powers. Through 3 grueling wars against the mountain peoples of central Italy, known as the Samnites, Rome extended its control from coast to coast across the Italian peninsula. This fierce struggle forged Rome's legions into an even more formidable fighting force. As Rome consolidated its position in central and southern Italy, it encountered the sophisticated Greek cities of Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. The most powerful of these Tarentum felt threatened by Roman expansion and called for help from Pyrrhus, king of Epirus in Greece. Pyrrhus arrived in Italy with a formidable force including war elephants previously unknown to Romans. Despite winning several battles against Roman armies, Pyrrhus suffered such heavy casualties that these Pyrrhic victories depleted his forces. After an unsuccessful campaign in Sicily, Pyrrhus returned to Greece, leaving the Greek cities to face Rome alone. Soon after Tarentum fell, and by 270 BCE, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula south of the Po River. Rome's governance of this new Italian confederacy showed remarkable wisdom. While maintaining firm control of foreign policy and military affairs, Rome allowed its allies to retain local autonomy. The extension of various grades of citizenship and legal rights created strong incentives for loyalty. Roman colonies placed throughout the peninsula served dual purposes, rewarding veterans with land while establishing strategic military outposts. This Italian alliance system would provide Rome with manpower resources that far outstripped any rival in the Mediterranean world, a decisive advantage in the conflicts to come. United Italy represented a geopolitical revolution in the ancient world, a large territorial state with centralized leadership, yet flexible enough to accommodate local diversity. Rome's attention soon turned beyond Italy to Sicily, where Carthage, a powerful maritime empire centered in North Africa, controlled the western portion of the island. When a group of Italian mercenaries called Mamertines requested Roman protection against the Syracusans and Carthaginians in Sicily, Rome faced a momentous choice. Intervention would mean war with Carthage, a naval power with centuries of maritime experience, a capability that Rome almost entirely lacked. The Senate's decision to accept the Mamertines' appeal triggered the First Punic War, 264-241 BCE. This conflict forced Rome to develop naval capabilities from scratch. After early defeats, the Romans famously captured a Carthaginian ship and used it as a template to build their own fleet. They ingeniously equipped these vessels with a corvus, a boarding bridge, that allowed Roman soldiers to use their superior infantry skills in naval combat, essentially turning sea battles into land battles. Despite catastrophic losses to storms and battles, Roman persistence eventually prevailed. Carthage ceded Sicily to Rome and paid a substantial indemnity, marking Rome's first overseas province. The Second Punic War, 218-201 BCE, brought Rome closer to destruction than any conflict since the Gallic sack. The brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca led an army complete with war elephants from Spain across the Alps into Italy, an astonishing feat of military daring. He inflicted 3 catastrophic defeats on Roman armies at the Trebia River, Lake Trasimene, and most devastatingly at Cannae, where perhaps 50,000 Romans perished in a single day. Despite these disasters, Rome famously refused to surrender. While Hannibal marched through Italy, Gaining allies among disaffected Roman subjects, Rome raised new armies. The general Quintus Fabius Maximus adopted delaying tactics, avoiding direct confrontation, and earning him the nickname Cunctator, the Delayer. Meanwhile, a young commander named Scipio Africanus took the war to Spain, capturing Carthaginian strongholds, and then boldly invaded North Africa. Faced with a direct threat to Carthage itself, Hannibal was recalled from Italy. At the decisive Battle of Zama, 202 BCE, Scipio, now called Africanus, defeated Hannibal, effectively ending the war. Carthage surrendered its navy, its overseas territories, and its political independence, becoming a Roman tributary state. Victory over Carthage established Rome as the dominant power in the western Mediterranean. Roman attention then turned eastward to the Hellenistic kingdoms that had emerged from Alexander the Great's empire. The Roman legions defeated King Philip VI of Macedon in 2 Macedonian wars, and subsequently overcame the Seleucid king Antiochus III at Thermopylae and Magnesia. The ancient kingdom of Macedon was divided into 4 republics under Roman supervision, and Greece itself eventually came under direct Roman rule. The same year, 146 BCE, that Rome finally destroyed Carthage in the Third Punic War, a brief, brutal conflict that culminated in the complete razing of Carthage-Rome, also definitively asserted its dominance in the East. These relentless conquests transformed Roman society profoundly. Enormous wealth flowed into Italy from the new provinces, enriching the state treasury and private individuals. Slaves captured in war became abundant, changing the nature of Italian agriculture, as small farms gave way to vast estates, latifundia worked by slave labor. This economic shift displaced many rural citizens who migrated to Rome, creating social tensions and overcrowding in the capital. The Republican political system, designed for a small city-state, struggled to administer a vast Mediterranean empire. Governors sent to rural provinces often exploited their positions for personal gain, leading to widespread corruption. Successful generals commanded the fierce loyalty of their troops, creating potential threats to civilian authority and the traditional order. The traditional Roman values of simplicity, duty, and self-sacrifice, which Romans called mos maiorum, the way of the elders, seemed to wane as luxury, ambition, and individualism increased. These internal changes and mounting external pressures set the stage for the tumultuous final century of the Republic. The tumultuous final century of the Roman Republic, marked by civil strife and ambitious warlords, laid the groundwork for its dramatic transformation into an empire. 2 brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, attempted to address rural poverty and land inequality through radical reforms in the late 2nd century BCE. Their efforts, however, provoked fierce opposition from wealthy senators, culminating in the assassination of Tiberius Gracchus, 133 BCE, the first political assassination in Rome for centuries. A decade later, his brother Gaius met a similar fate after proposing even more sweeping reforms, including grain subsidies for urban citizens. These events shattered the traditional consensus of the ruling elite and established political violence as a dangerous tool in Roman politics, opening a floodgate of unrest. In the decades that followed, ambitious generals like Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla increasingly used their military power to intervene in political disputes. Marius, a new man from outside the traditional aristocracy, reformed the Roman army by allowing landless citizens to enlist, creating a professional, long-service army whose loyalty was often tied to their general rather than the state. Sulla, a staunch conservative, led his army in an unprecedented march on Rome, 88 BCE, marking the first time a Roman general turned his legions against the city itself. After defeating his rivals in a bloody civil war, Sulla had himself appointed dictator and conducted systematic purges of his enemies through proscription lists, public postings naming those to be killed, and their property confiscated. Though Sulla eventually retired, his actions created a dangerous precedent, demonstrating that military power could dictate political outcomes. The stage was set for the ultimate power struggle. Three powerful men, Gnaeus Pompey Magnus, Marcus Licinius Crassus, and Gaius Julius Caesar, formed an unofficial coalition known as the First Triumvirate in 60 BCE, seeking to dominate Roman politics through mutual support. Caesar, arguably the most ambitious and brilliant of the three, secured command in Gaul, where his legendary campaigns conquered modern France and briefly invaded Britain, earning him unprecedented wealth, military experience, and immense popularity with the Roman people and his legions. When the alliance fractured, exacerbated by Crassus's death in battle, the Senate, fearing Caesar's growing power, aligned with Pompey. Ordered to surrender his command and return to Rome as a private citizen, Caesar instead made his fateful decision. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BCE, igniting civil war with the famous declaration, Alea iacta est, the die is cast. After defeating Pompey's forces across the Mediterranean, Caesar became dictator of Rome, implementing numerous reforms, including a new calendar. However, his increasing honors lifetime dictatorship and perceived aspirations to monarchy alarmed staunch Republicans. On the Ides of March 15th, 44th, BCE, conspirators, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, assassinated Caesar in the Senate House. Rather than restoring the Republic, Caesar's murder triggered renewed civil war. His adopted son, Octavian, a shrewd and calculating young man, joined with Mark Antony Caesar's trusted lieutenant and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus in the Second Triumvirate 43 BCE to hunt down Caesar's killers. After defeating Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi, the triumvirs divided the Roman world among themselves. Inevitable tensions emerged, particularly between Octavian in the west and Antony in the east, where he allied himself with Egypt's charismatic queen, Cleopatra Sadatis. The final showdown came at the Battle of Actium 31 BCE, a decisive naval engagement where Octavian's forces, led by his brilliant admiral Agrippa, defeated the combined fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. The lovers fled to Egypt, where they later committed suicide. Octavian, now the sole ruler of Rome's vast territories, learned from Caesar's mistakes. While accumulating unprecedented personal power, he meticulously maintained republican facades, referring to himself as Princeps First Citizen rather than king or dictator. In 27 BCE, the Senate awarded him the honorary title Augustus, meaning revered or sacred, marking the effective end of the Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. This Augustan settlement delicately balanced imperial power with a veneer of republican tradition, creating an era of stability known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Augustus would rule for an astonishing 41 years, 27 BCE, 14 CE, establishing patterns that would define Roman imperial governance for centuries. He significantly reduced the size of the army from 60 legions to 28 settling veterans in colonies throughout Italy and the provinces, thereby creating a loyal, retired military class. He reformed the tax system, established a postal service cursus publicus, created firefighting cohorts, and organized a permanent police force in Rome, vastly improving urban life. His extensive building projects transformed the capital so much that he famously boasted of finding Rome a city of brick and leaving it a city of marble. In foreign affairs, Augustus secured and expanded Roman frontiers. Germanic tribes were pushed back beyond the Rhine, while the empire's boundary in the east was secured through diplomacy with the Parthian Empire. Spain was finally fully conquered after centuries of resistance, and the Danube became Rome's northern frontier in Europe. Perhaps most crucially, Augustus created a relatively stable system of succession. Having no biological son, he gradually elevated his stepson Tiberius to prominence, ensuring a smoother transfer of power upon his death. Tiberius, 1437 CE, a capable general but a reluctant ruler, began a dynasty known as the Julio-Claudians that would govern Rome for more than 50 years. His rule started well but grew increasingly dark after he withdrew to the island of Capri, leaving affairs of state to the ambitious Praetorian prefect Sejanus. After uncovering Sejanus's plot to seize power, Tiberius launched a wave of treason trials that spread fear through the Roman aristocracy. Tiberius was succeeded by his grandnephew Caligula, 37 to 41 CE, whose early promise devolved into apparent madness. Stories of his excesses, cruelty, and bizarre behavior, including plans to make his horse a consul, may be exaggerated, but his assassination, after just 4 years of rule, speaks to his unpopularity among the Roman elite. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's household troops, then controversially elevated Claudius, 4154 CE, to the throne. Despite physical disabilities that had led his family to sideline him, Claudius proved an able administrator. During his 13-year reign, he expanded the empire, conquering Britain and incorporating new provinces in the east. He also extended citizenship more widely and admitted Gauls to the Senate, recognizing that Rome's future lay in provincial integration rather than Italian domination. The Julio-Claudian dynasty ended with Nero, 54-68 CE, who began his reign promisingly under the guidance of the philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus. As he asserted his independence, however, his rule grew tyrannical. He had his mother, Agrippina, murdered, kicked his pregnant wife to death, and persecuted Christians after the Great Fire of Rome, 64 CE, reportedly using them as human torches. Rising unpopularity and military revolts eventually led to Nero's suicide, reportedly lamenting, "What an artist dies in me." Nero's death ushered in chaos known as the Year of Four Emperors, 69 CE. In quick succession, the generals Galba Otho and Vitellius claimed the throne, each overthrown by military revolt. Finally, Vespasian, 69-79 CE, commanding the Eastern legions, emerged victorious, establishing the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian brought stability back to the empire during his 10-year reign. A man of humble origins, with a practical approach to governance, he restored fiscal responsibility after Nero's extravagance. His greatest architectural legacy was beginning construction of the Flavian amphitheater, better known today as the Colosseum, built on the site of Nero's opulent palace as a magnificent gift to the Roman people. His eldest son, Titus, 79 to 81 CE, succeeded him just months before Mount Vesuvius erupted, destroying the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Titus handled this and other disasters, including a fire in Rome, with such compassion that he was widely mourned when he died after just 2 years of rule. The final Flavian emperor was Domitian, 81-96 CE, whose 15-year reign witnessed significant military activity along the Danube frontier and in Britain. While an effective administrator, his autocratic tendencies alienated the Senate. His assassination brought the Flavian dynasty to an end. The Senate then selected one of its own members, the elderly Nerva, 96-98 CE, as emperor. With no natural heir and limited military support, Nerva wisely adopted the popular General Trajan as his successor, establishing a pattern of adoptive succession that would serve Rome brilliantly for nearly a century, producing a series of highly capable rulers. Trajan, 98-117 CE, born in Spain, became the first emperor from outside Italy. His 19-year reign saw the Roman Empire reach its greatest territorial extent. He conquered Dacia, roughly modern Romania, incorporating its rich gold mines into the empire. His most ambitious campaigns annexed Armenia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Parthia, briefly extending Roman rule to the Persian Gulf. Though some of these eastern conquests would be abandoned by his successor, they represented the high watermark of Roman expansion. Beyond military glory, Trajan was celebrated for his domestic policies. His extensive building programs included a massive forum in Rome and projects throughout the provinces. He established the Alimenta, a welfare program providing support for poor children in Italy, and was generally regarded even by later Romans as the optimal emperor against whom others were measured. On his deathbed, Trajan may have adopted his relative Hadrian, 176-138 CE, though some suspected the adoption was fabricated by Hadrian's supporters. Regardless, Hadrian became emperor and immediately shifted imperial policy. Recognizing that the empire had reached its practical limits, he wisely withdrew from Trajan's most recent eastern conquests and focused on consolidation rather than expansion. Hadrian spent more than half his 21-year reign traveling throughout the provinces, often walking on foot with his troops while inspecting frontier defenses. In Britain, he ordered the construction of a massive wall spanning the island's narrow northern waist, Hadrian's Wall, creating a barrier against tribal incursions that stands partially intact today. Similar frontier works were strengthened throughout the empire, establishing clear boundaries in place of continued expansion. A lover of Greek culture who wore a beard in the Hellenic fashion, unlike his clean-shaven predecessors, Hadrian spent extensive time in Athens, completing the massive temple of Olympian Zeus, begun centuries earlier. His architectural legacy in Rome included the magnificent Pantheon, with its revolutionary concrete dome still standing today as a testament to Roman engineering brilliance. Hadrian's chosen successor, Antoninus Pius, 138-161 CE, ruled for 23 remarkably peaceful years. His reign saw no major wars or internal disturbances, allowing the empire to prosper. Continuing the tradition of adoption, Antoninus selected Marcus Aurelius as his heir, with the provision that Marcus, in turn, adopt Lucius Verus as co-emperor. Marcus Aurelius, 161-180 CE, a devoted Stoic philosopher whose meditations remain widely read today, found his reign dominated by military challenges despite his philosophical nature. Germanic tribes, possibly pushed westward by population movements deeper in Europe and Asia, began pressing against Roman frontiers on the Danube in greater numbers than ever before. While Marcus and Lucius initially ruled jointly, Lucius's death left Marcus in sole command during increasingly difficult times. Beyond external threats, the empire faced a devastating pandemic known as the Antonine Plague, possibly smallpox, brought back by troops from campaigns in the east. This disease killed perhaps 5 million people throughout Roman territories, weakening both military and economic strength at a critical juncture. Despite these challenges, Marcus Aurelius maintained the frontiers and even planned to create new provinces beyond the Danube before his death. Unlike his predecessors, who chose the most qualified successor through adoption, Marcus allowed his biological son, Commodus, to succeed him, a decision that would have dire consequences for Rome. Looking back across this 2-century span from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, this era represents the Roman Empire at its zenith. The population reached perhaps 70 million people living in relative security under the Pax Romana or Roman peace. A vast network of roads totaling over 250,000 miles facilitated trade communication and military movement throughout the Mediterranean basin and beyond. Cities flourished with public amenities unknown in earlier ages, aqueducts delivering fresh water, public baths, theaters, and forums. Roman law, increasingly sophisticated and humane, was administered across 3 continents. Literature and art thrived during this period as well. Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, Ovid's inventive mythological narratives, in the Metamorphoses, the histories of Tacitus, the biographies of Suetonius, and the letters of Pliny the Younger all date from this era. While innovations in science lagged behind literary achievements, practical knowledge in fields like architecture, engineering, agriculture, and medicine made daily life for Romans more comfortable than for any large population before them. Perhaps most significantly, this period saw the birth and the early spread of Christianity. Jesus of Nazareth lived and died during the reign of Tiberius, and the new religion slowly spread throughout the empire despite sporadic persecution. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, Christian communities existed in most major cities, laying foundations for developments that would transform the later empire. The early empire also witnessed the increasing importance of the provinces. Italy lost its privileged position as emperors from Spain and beyond assumed the purple. Citizenship was gradually extended more widely, culminating generations later in its grant to all free inhabitants of the empire. Trade networks connected distant regions, with goods flowing from as far as India and China into Roman markets. This remarkable era of stability and prosperity rested on several pillars: the Augustan settlement that balanced imperial power with respect for tradition, the adoption system that produced a series of capable rulers, frontiers secure enough to prevent major invasions, an economy that, despite its limitations, by modern standards, generated sufficient surplus to maintain urban civilization, and a standing army of nearly 400,000 men. As Marcus Aurelius drew his final breath on the Danubian frontier, none could foresee that this golden age was ending. The accession of Commodus would mark the beginning of troubles that would test the resilience of the imperial system in ways its creators never imagined. Yet the achievements of the early empire would echo through the centuries, creating an ideal of peace, prosperity, and good governance that would inspire civilizations long after Rome itself had fallen. The golden age of the Roman Empire began to dim as Commodus 180-192 CE assumed the purple following the death of his philosophical father, Marcus Aurelius. Unlike his Stoic predecessor, Commodus had little interest in the burdens of governance. Handsome and athletic, he preferred the gladiatorial arena to the council chamber. He often fought in staged combats, charging the imperial treasury enormous sums for his appearances, and boasting of thousands of victories against opponents who naturally dared not defeat him. While Commodus indulged his fantasies, even renaming Rome Colonia Commodiana and styling himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, the machinery of empire continued functioning through the efforts of experienced administrators. Yet his capricious executions of senators and officials created a climate of pervasive fear. On the final day of the year 192 CE, he was strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner Narcissus, part of a desperate plot involving his inner circle, who feared they would be next to face his unpredictable wrath. After Commodus's assassination, the venerable General Pertinax was elevated to the throne by the Senate. His attempts to restore discipline among the powerful and unruly Praetorian Guard proved fatal. They murdered him after just 3 months when he refused their demands for a special bonus. What followed was perhaps the most shameful episode in Roman history. The Praetorians literally auctioned the empire to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator, won this dubious honor, but his reign lasted only 66 days. Provincial armies, disgusted by events in Rome, swiftly put forward their own commanders as imperial candidates. From this chaos emerged Septimius Severus, 193-211 CE commander of the Pannonian legions, who marched on Rome, disbanded the disgraced Praetorians, and established a new dynasty. Severus was a capable and ruthless soldier who secured his position through a combination of military victories and the systematic elimination of rivals. Born in Leptis Magna in North Africa, he was the first emperor from that continent and spoke Latin with a distinct accent. His reign brought significant changes to Roman governance, particularly the increasing militarization of the administration and greater reliance on equestrians knights rather than senators for key positions, signaling a shift in imperial priorities towards military strength. During his 18-year rule, Severus conducted successful campaigns in the east against the Parthian Empire, creating the new province of Mesopotamia with its rich farmlands. He also traveled to Britain to strengthen Hadrian's Wall and campaign against the Caledonians in Scotland. It was there, in the northern outpost of Eboracum, modern York, that he died, reportedly advising his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn everyone else, a stark testament to his priorities. Those sons, Caracalla, 211-217 CE, and Geta, were intended to rule jointly, but their hatred for each other made cooperation impossible. Within a year, Caracalla had his brother murdered in their mother's arms and ordered a damnatio memoriae, erasing Geta from official records and monuments. Caracalla then embarked on a reign of terror against his brother's supporters. Despite his cruelty, Caracalla issued one of the most significant edicts in Roman history, the Constitutio Antoniniana 212 CE, granting Roman citizenship to all free men within the empire. While partially motivated by a desire to increase tax revenue, citizens paid more types of taxes. This decree formalized the evolution of Rome from a city-state to a universal empire, where citizenship was defined by law rather than ethnic origin. Caracalla was assassinated while campaigning in the east, stabbed to death by a soldier as he relieved himself along a road. The Severan dynasty continued through a series of rulers, connected by the remarkable women of the family, particularly Julia Maesa, sister-in-law of Septimius Severus, who ingeniously engineered the rise of her grandsons, Elagabalus 218 and 222 CE, and later Alexander Severus. Elagabalus scandalized Rome with his religious devotion to the Eastern sun god, whose name he bore, attempting to make this foreign cult supreme over traditional Roman worship. His alleged effeminacy and bizarre behavior, including reports that he married a male charioteer, further alienated traditional Romans. After 4 years, the Praetorians murdered him and threw his body into the Tiber. Alexander Severus, 222-235 CE, just 13 when he ascended the throne, ruled under the regency of his mother Julia Mamaea. His 13-year reign attempted to restore good relations with the Senate and traditional values, but military challenges were mounting. A new Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, had replaced the Parthians and posed a greater threat in the east. Meanwhile, Germanic tribes increased pressure on the Rhine and Danube frontiers. When Alexander negotiated with Germanic tribes rather than fighting them, his troops mutinied and proclaimed Maximinus Thrax, 235-238 CE, a giant former shepherd from Thrace, as emperor. Maximinus represented a new type of emperor, a soldier of humble origins with little education or refinement who rose through military merit alone. Though an effective general, his harsh taxation to fund military campaigns made him deeply unpopular with civilians. The Senate, desperate to restore their influence, supported a revolt led by the elderly governor Gordian and his son in Africa. When they were quickly defeated, the Senate appointed 2 of their own members, Pupienus and Balbinus, as co-emperors. Maximinus marched on Italy, but was murdered by his own troops as they besieged Aquileia. The Senate's appointees were themselves soon killed by the Praetorian Guard, who elevated the 13-year-old Gordian III, grandson of the earlier claimant. This dizzying sequence of emperors and usurpers inaugurated what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, 235-284 CE. Over the next few decades, at least 26 men claimed the imperial title, most ruling for just a few years before meeting violent ends. The Roman world seemed to be unraveling as the imperial office became the prize in an endless, destructive military lottery. External threats compounded the internal chaos. The Emperor Decius, 249-251 CE, and his son died fighting Goths at the Battle of Abratus, the first Roman emperor to fall in battle against foreign enemies. The Emperor Valerian, 253-260 CE, suffered an even worse fate, captured alive by the Sassanid Persian king Shapur I and allegedly used as a human footstool before being skinned after death and stuffed as a trophy. With central authority collapsing, the empire began to fragment. In the west, a Gallic empire encompassing Gaul Britain and parts of Spain broke away under a succession of local rulers. In the east, the desert trading city of Palmyra, under the formidable Queen Zenobia, established control over provinces from Egypt to Asia Minor. Economic crisis accompanied political disintegration as the currency was repeatedly debased to pay the armies, triggering severe inflation. It seemed Rome's 1,000-year story might be approaching its end. Yet even in this darkest hour, resilient structures and capable individuals emerged to pull the empire back from the brink. The turning point came with the accession of Claudius II Gothicus 268-270 CE. In his brief 2-year reign, he defeated Gothic invaders in the Balkans so decisively that he earned the title Gothicus. Though he died of plague, his work was continued by Aurelian 270-275 CE, acclaimed by his troops following Claudius's death. Aurelian's 5-year reign earned him the title Restorer of the World. He defeated the Palmyrene Empire, bringing Queen Zenobia to Rome in golden chains for his triumph. He then recovered the breakaway Gallic provinces, reunifying the empire. To protect Rome itself from barbarian raids, he built a massive new wall circuit, the Aurelian Walls, that still stands partially intact today. He reformed the currency and established an official sun cult that attempted to provide religious unity. Aurelian's assassination, based on a secretary's false claim that the emperor planned to execute several officers, threatened to unravel his achievements. Several short-lived emperors followed before Carus established a brief dynasty. While campaigning successfully against Persia, Carus allegedly died when his tent was struck by lightning. Though assassination remains possible, his son Numerian was murdered by his Praetorian prefect Aper while returning from the Persian campaign. At Numerian's funeral, the assembled officers acclaimed Diocletian 284-305 CE, a cavalry commander of humble Dalmatian origin, as emperor. Diocletian immediately executed Aper, personally fulfilling a prophecy that he would become emperor after killing the boar Aper in Latin. With Diocletian's accession, the crisis period finally ended. Though the empire had survived, it was profoundly transformed. The old Augustan Principate, with its careful balance of republican forms and imperial power, was gone. In its place stood a more overtly autocratic system, where the emperor was increasingly seen as a remote, sacred figure rather than first among equals. Military needs now dominated all aspects of governance. The army had nearly doubled in size to face multiple frontier threats, consuming an ever larger share of the state's resources. Taxation had grown heavier and more systematic to support these forces. The distinction between Italy and the provinces had largely vanished, as the entire empire shouldered similar burdens. Yet despite the trauma of the 3rd century crisis, important cultural developments continued. This period saw the rise of Neoplatonism through philosophers like Plotinus, whose mystical vision of reality would deeply influence later Christian thought. Christianity itself spread widely during these troubled decades, offering spiritual solace and community in uncertain times. The religion that had once been a persecuted minority was becoming a major force in Roman society. Roman law continued to evolve, with jurists like Ulpian and Papinian refining legal concepts that would influence civilizations far beyond Rome's eventual fall. Despite economic difficulties, Roman engineering still produced remarkable works, from Aurelian's walls to public buildings throughout the provinces. As the 3rd century closed, the empire that Diocletian inherited was wounded but not defeated. The coming reforms would reshape Rome's government, completely creating a new imperial system capable of meeting the challenges of a changing world. The transition from the early empire of Augustus to the late Roman world was complete a transformation forged in the crucible of crisis and recovery. As Diocletian stood victorious after claiming the purple, the Roman world lay exhausted from a half-century of unrelenting crisis. Drawing profound lessons from this turmoil, the new emperor would reshape imperial governance more dramatically than anyone since Augustus. Born to a humble family in Dalmatia on the Adriatic coast, Diocletian had risen through military service without the benefit of aristocratic connections. This outsider's perspective perhaps allowed him to see more clearly the systemic problems facing Rome. The empire had grown too vast and complex for a single ruler to manage effectively. Military emergencies on one frontier often required the emperor's immediate presence, just as crises erupted elsewhere. Recognizing this critical reality, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of appointing a co-emperor. In 286 CE, he elevated his fellow officer Maximian to the rank of Augustus, assigning him responsibility for the western provinces, while Diocletian himself focused on the more vulnerable and populous east. This initial division proved insufficient, so in 293 CE, Diocletian expanded the imperial college further by appointing two junior emperors called Caesars Galerius in the east and Constantius Chlorus in the west. This system, known as the Tetrarchy or Rule of Four, effectively divided administrative responsibilities while meticulously maintaining the fiction of a unified Roman Empire. Each tetrarch governed a quarter of Roman territory from his own capital city, Nicomedia, Milan, Sirmium, Trier, as Rome itself lost its central administrative role. The arrangement included a plan for orderly succession. After 20 years, the senior Augusti would voluntarily retire, allowing the Caesars to be promoted and select new junior colleagues. This carefully designed mechanism aimed to prevent the devastating succession crises that had plagued the 3rd century. Beyond restructuring imperial leadership, Diocletian thoroughly reorganized the empire's administrative geography. Provinces were subdivided into smaller, more manageable units, nearly doubling their number. These provinces were grouped into 12 dioceses themselves, organized into 4 prefectures corresponding to each tetrarch's territory. This arrangement created multiple layers of oversight intended to reduce corruption and improve efficiency. The military underwent similar reorganization. Diocletian strategically separated civil and military authority, which had traditionally been combined in provincial governors. He substantially increased the size of the army to address multiple frontier threats simultaneously. To limit the power of potentially rebellious generals, he reduced the size of provincial armies while creating a central mobile reserve that could rapidly respond to crises. These expanded military and administrative structures required greater resources. Diocletian implemented a comprehensive census to identify taxable wealth and individuals. His new tax system required payment in kind goods and produce rather than increasingly worthless currency, with set quotas of produce and goods collected from each region. To ensure essential services continued, Diocletian controversially mandated hereditary occupations for certain vital professions, binding sons to follow their father's trades. While these reforms undeniably stabilized the empire, they came at the cost of significantly increased state control over individual lives. The relatively free market economy of the early empire gave way to a more regulated system where the state's needs took precedence over private initiative. The distinction between honestiores, the honorable wealthy elite, and humiliores, the humble common people, became more pronounced with different legal standards applied to each. Diocletian also attempted to address economic instability through his edict on maximum prices, 301 CE, which set price ceilings for thousands of goods and services throughout the empire. Though well-intentioned, this measure proved impossible to enforce and was ultimately abandoned due to black markets and widespread non-compliance. In religious matters, Diocletian initially showed tolerance, but later launched what became known as the Great Persecution against Christians beginning 303 CE. This final and most severe attempt to suppress Christianity included the destruction of churches, confiscation of scripture, and execution of clergy. Despite its intensity, the persecution varied by region and ultimately failed to halt Christianity's relentless spread, instead creating a new generation of martyrs. True to his succession plan, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of voluntarily retiring in 305 CE, compelling his co-Augustus Maximian to do the same. He spent his remaining years cultivating cabbages at his magnificent palace in Split on the Dalmatian coast, reportedly telling visitors that, "If you could see the cabbages I grow with my own hands, you would not ask me to exchange them for the imperial purple." However, the carefully designed tetrarchic system collapsed almost immediately after its creator's retirement. The succession plans were undermined by dynastic sentiment, as troops proclaimed Constantine son of Constantius Chlorus and Maxentius, the son of Maximian, as emperors. The following years saw complex power struggles as various claimants fought for supremacy. Constantine ultimately emerged victorious from these conflicts. According to Christian tradition, before the crucial battle of the Milvian Bridge against Maxentius in 312 CE, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky with the words, "In hoc signo vinces," in this sign conquer. Whether motivated by genuine conversion or shrewd political calculation, Constantine's embrace of Christianity would profoundly transform the Roman world. The Edict of Milan, issued jointly with his eastern colleague Licinius in 313 CE, formally ended the persecution of Christians and restored their confiscated property. Though not making Christianity the official state religion, the edict granted it legal status and imperial favor, marking a turning point in the religion's history. Constantine later defeated Licinius to become sole ruler of a reunited empire in 324 CE, consolidating his power. Perhaps Constantine's most consequential decision was founding a new capital on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. Dedicated as Constantinople in 330 CE, it occupied an unparalleled strategic position controlling the strait between Europe and Asia. This new Christian city, free from Rome's pagan associations and strategically located closer to the empire's wealthy eastern provinces and more vulnerable frontiers, would serve as the imperial capital for over 1,000 years. Constantine maintained many of Diocletian's administrative reforms while softening some of their harsher aspects. He created a new gold currency, the solidus, which maintained its value for centuries, bringing much-needed monetary stability after decades of inflation. His religious policies, favored Christians without directly suppressing traditional worship, beginning a gradual transition that would accelerate under his successors. After Constantine's death, the empire passed to his three surviving sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. Their reigns were marked by fratricidal conflict and continuing religious tensions, particularly surrounding the Arian controversy about Christ's divine nature. Constantius II eventually emerged as sole emperor, ruling until his death. The brief reign of Julian the Apostate, 3661-3663, CE, Constantine's nephew, marked the last serious attempt to restore traditional Roman religion. Raised as a Christian but secretly converting to paganism, Julian sought to revitalize classical culture and reduce Christian privileges during his 18-month rule. His death, fighting the Persians, ended this religious counter-revolution. The emperors who followed Julian maintained Christianity's favored position. Under Theodosius, the member 379-395 CE Christianity became the official state religion. The Edict of Thessalonica, 380 CE, established Nicene Christianity, the Trinitarian faith, as the empire's sole legitimate faith. Subsequent edicts closed pagan temples and prohibited traditional sacrifices. The millennium-old religious traditions that had sustained Rome since its founding were now officially abandoned, a profound cultural and ideological shift. Theodosius faced significant external challenges beyond religious matters. His predecessor Valens had suffered a catastrophic defeat at Adrianople 378 CE against Gothic forces, with perhaps two-thirds of the Eastern Field Army destroyed and Valens himself killed. This battle demonstrated the growing military threat posed by Germanic peoples seeking land within the empire. Rather than attempting to expel these Goths, Theodosius settled them within imperial territory as foederati allied troops, serving under their own leaders while acknowledging Roman sovereignty. This pragmatic solution provided needed manpower but increased the influence of semi-autonomous Germanic groups within Roman borders. The late Roman military relied increasingly on such allied contingents and recruited heavily among Germanic peoples for regular units as well. The stereotype of effete Romans hiring barbarians to fight their battles is oversimplified. Many Romans still served, and many barbarians were thoroughly Romanized. Nevertheless, the army's ethnic composition changed significantly from earlier centuries. Social and economic developments during this period reflected the empire's transformation. Christianity reshaped cultural values, emphasizing otherworldly salvation over classical civic virtues. The urban middle classes declined as imperial service and large agricultural estates dominated economic life. Cities shrank within defensive walls as their classical monuments were cannibalized for building material or converted to Christian use. Yet amid these changes, remarkable cultural achievements continued. This era saw the flowering of patristic literature as Christian thinkers like Ambrose Jerome and Augustine developed sophisticated theological and philosophical systems that would influence Western thought for centuries. In law, the Theodosian Code, compiled in 438 CE, compiled imperial legislation, creating a systematic legal reference that preserved Roman jurisprudence for future generations. Upon Theodosius's death in 395 CE, the empire was divided between his sons Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. Though theoretically temporary, this division would prove permanent. While the Eastern and Western courts maintained the fiction of a unified empire, they increasingly pursued separate interests and faced different challenges. The eastern half, wealthier and better protected geographically, would endure for another 1,000 years as what modern historians call the Byzantine Empire, though its citizens continued to call themselves Romans. The western half, however, faced existential challenges that would lead to its collapse within a single lifetime. As the 4th century closed, the transformed Roman state bore little resemblance to the Principate of Augustus. The emperor now ruled as an Oriental-style monarch, addressed as Dominus Lord rather than Princeps. Officials bowed before the imperial presence, which was increasingly secluded behind elaborate court ceremonial. Christianity had displaced traditional religion, altering fundamental assumptions about society and human purpose. Yet for all these changes, the essential continuity of Roman governance remained. The empire still controlled roughly the same territories as under the Antonines. Latin and Greek remained the languages of administration. Roman law still regulated daily life. Citizens still identified as Romans, even as what that identity meant evolved with changing circumstances. The stage was now set for the final act of the Western Empire's long drama. As Germanic pressure on the frontiers increased and internal resources dwindled, the Western emperors would face challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The coming century would witness the end of direct Roman rule in the West. As the 5th century dawned, the Roman world stood divided between the sons of Theodosius. While technically ruling a single empire, Arcadius in Constantinople and Honorius in Milan, later Ravenna presided over increasingly separate realms. Both young emperors relied heavily on powerful advisors, Rufinus in the east and Stilicho in the west. The resulting court intrigues, often fueled by personal rivalries and short-sighted policies, would fatally weaken imperial authority at precisely the moment when Rome faced its greatest external challenge. The catalyst for the coming crisis was the arrival of the Huns from the Eurasian steppes. Their relentless westward migration, a terrifying force of nature, pushed various Germanic peoples against and ultimately across the Roman frontiers in unprecedented numbers. The most immediate threat came from the Goths, who after the death of their leader Fritigern, united under an ambitious new king named Alaric. Alaric's Goths settled within the empire as federati since their victory at Adrianople felt mistreated by imperial authorities. When their demands for better terms were rebuffed, they revolted and began moving through the Balkans, alternately negotiating with and threatening both Eastern and Western imperial courts. Stilicho himself of partial Vandal ancestry, but thoroughly Roman in culture and loyalty, was Rome's most capable general and strategist. He handled the Gothic threat with a combination of military action and diplomacy, even defeating Alaric in battle multiple times. However, his efforts were constantly undermined by suspicion from both imperial courts, each fearing he sought to control the entire empire. In 408 CE, a court faction persuaded Honorius to execute Stilicho on trumped-up charges of treason. With Stilicho gone, the Western Empire lost its most capable defender, leaving a devastating void. Alaric saw his opportunity. He invaded Italy, and in 1410 CE accomplished what had not happened in 800 years, the sack of Rome itself. Though the Goths remained in the city for only 3 days, and the damage was relatively contained compared to later sackings, the psychological impact on the Roman world was immense. Saint Jerome, writing in Bethlehem, lamented that the bright light of all the world was put out, and the whole world perished in one city. After Alaric's death, shortly after the sack, the Goths moved into Gaul and eventually settled in Aquitaine as Roman federates, still ostensibly under Roman authority, but effectively forming a powerful, autonomous kingdom within the empire's borders. Meanwhile, other Germanic peoples had taken advantage of Stilicho's absence and the freezing of the Rhine River during a particularly harsh winter of 406 CE. The Vandal Sueves and Alans poured into Gaul and eventually Spain, establishing their own territories within nominally Roman provinces. The Western imperial government, now permanently based in Ravenna, a more secure swamp-protected city than Rome, struggled desperately to respond to these multiple incursions. Increasingly real power rested not with the emperor himself, who was often weak and ineffective, but with the master of soldiers, Magister Militum, the supreme military commander. For nearly 2 decades, that pivotal position was held by Flavius Aetius, sometimes called the last of the Romans. While Aetius tirelessly worked to maintain what remained of Roman authority in Gaul, forging uneasy alliances with various Germanic groups, a new and terrifying threat emerged in North Africa. The Vandals, under their cunning and ruthless king Gaiseric, crossed from Spain to Africa in 429 CE, conquering the wealthy provinces that had long supplied Rome with grain and tax revenue. By seizing Carthage in 439 CE, they established a powerful kingdom and built a formidable fleet that would dominate the western Mediterranean, severely crippling Rome's ability to feed its people and fund its armies. As these settlements of Germanic peoples within the empire were unfolding, the Western Empire faced its most fearsome opponent, Attila the Hun. Having already ravaged the eastern provinces and extracted tribute from Constantinople, Attila turned westward. In 451 CE, he invaded Gaul, leading his vast Hunnic and allied Germanic forces. Aetius, in his finest moment, cobbled together a diverse coalition of Roman forces and Germanic federates, including Visigoths, Burgundians, and Franks, that confronted the Hunnic army at the epic battle of the Catalonian plains. This desperate defense, a bloody and brutal clash, ultimately halted Attila's advance in Gaul, preventing him from devastating the entire province. The following year, 452 CE, Attila invaded Italy. Rome seemed doomed until an embassy led by Pope Leo I somehow persuaded the Hun to withdraw. While later accounts would attribute this to divine intervention, more practical factors likely included disease in Attila's army, severe food shortages in ravaged Italy, and possibly large bribes from Constantinople. Attila's death shortly after this campaign and the subsequent collapse of Hunnic power gave Rome a brief respite. That same year, however, court intrigue led to the murder of Aetius on the orders of Emperor Valentinian III. The emperor himself was assassinated by Aetius's supporters just months later, ending the Theodosian dynasty in the west. What followed was a rapid succession of short-lived emperors, many mere puppets of powerful military commanders. Majorian 457-461 CE, who ruled for just a few years, represented the last serious attempt to restore Roman power in the West. His efforts to rebuild the military and recover North Africa from the Vandals ended with his defeat and execution. After Majorian Western emperors controlled little beyond Italy itself, with various Germanic kingdoms establishing effective independence in former provinces. In Spain, the Suevi controlled the northwest, while Visigoths expanded their territory from Aquitaine. In Gaul, Burgundians ruled the southeast, while Franks gradually increased their power in the north. Britain, abandoned by imperial forces decades earlier, had developed its own post-Roman society, increasingly influenced by Saxon settlers. By the later decades of the 5th century, the Western emperors had become irrelevant to most of the former provinces. Real power in Italy rested with the military commander Ricimer, and after his death, with his successors Gundobad and finally Orestes. Orestes installed his young son, Romulus Augustulus, as emperor in 475 CE, though the boy exercised no actual authority and was little more than a figurehead. Germanic troops in Italy, mainly from the Syrian and Herulian tribes, demanded permanent land grants similar to those given to federates in other provinces. When Orestes refused, they rallied behind Odoacer, a German officer in Roman service. In 476 CE, Odoacer overthrew Orestes and deposed Romulus Augustulus, ending the charade of imperial rule in the West. In a remarkably pragmatic solution, Odoacer sent the imperial regalia, the crown, purple robes, etc., to Emperor Zeno in Constantinople, signaling that a separate Western emperor was unnecessary. He requested and received the title of patrician governing Italy, nominally as Zeno's viceroy, but effectively as an independent king. Romulus Augustulus, still a teenager, was permitted to retire to a country estate with a generous pension, an unexpectedly merciful end for a deposed ruler. This moment in 476 CE is traditionally marked as the fall of Rome, or more accurately, the end of the Western Roman Empire. Yet for people living through these events, there was no dramatic cataclysmic collapse. Many of the structures of Roman life continued under new management. Germanic kings issued laws based on Roman models, maintained some form of tax system, and often employed Roman administrators. The fall was not a single event, but a complex process of political fragmentation, economic decline, and gradual cultural transformation. Several factors contributed to the Western Empire's failure to withstand the pressures that its Eastern counterparts successfully navigated. The West faced more exposed land frontiers and more frequent invasions. Its economy had been less urbanized and more agrarian than the East's. Even in better times, the wealthy provinces of North Africa and parts of Gaul that had sustained Western finances were lost to Vandals and Visigoths, creating a spiral of declining resources. Western emperors also suffered from a deficit of legitimacy compared to their Eastern colleagues. The constant civil wars and rapid turnover of rulers undermined confidence in imperial authority. After the sack of Rome, the psychological foundation of empire, the belief in Rome's eternal destiny, was severely damaged in the West. Yet even as direct imperial rule faded, Romanitas Roman culture and identity endured. Latin remained the language of administration and literacy. The Catholic Church, increasingly powerful, preserved Roman organizational structures and legal concepts. Aqueducts still carried water, and people still gathered in forums, even as new Germanic lords ruled from former imperial palaces. The end of the Western Empire did not mean the end of the Roman world. In the East, the empire continued to flourish from its magnificent capital at Constantinople. The Emperor Zeno and his successors considered themselves the legitimate rulers of the entire Roman world, including the lost western provinces that they hoped to someday recover. In Italy itself, Odoacer's rule would prove brief. Emperor Zeno authorized Theodoric, king of the Ostrogoths, to invade Italy and depose Odoacer. After defeating and eventually murdering his rival, Theodoric established a kingdom that represented one of the most successful syntheses of Roman and Germanic elements in the post-imperial West. As the Western provinces began their gradual transformation into what would eventually become medieval Europe, the idea of Rome retained its powerful grip on the imagination. Germanic kings sought recognition from Constantinople and coveted Roman titles. The church increasingly filled the administrative vacancy left by imperial retreat. And far to the east, the Roman Empire, now Greek-speaking and Christian, but still calling itself Roman, continued to uphold the legacy of Augustus and Constantine. The end of the Western Roman Empire thus marks not a cataclysmic collapse, but a significant transition point in a much longer process of transformation. The political structure created by Augustus 5 centuries earlier had finally failed in the West, but Roman civilization, like a great river dividing around an obstacle, would continue flowing through new channels in the medieval world to come. While the Western Roman Empire faded into history, its Eastern counterpart continued to thrive. The citizens of this surviving realm never called themselves Byzantine, a term invented by modern historians in the 17th century. They proudly identified as Romans Romaioi, in their increasingly Greek speech, the rightful inheritors of Caesar and Constantine. For nearly a millennium after the deposition of Romulus Augustulus, this Eastern Roman Empire would preserve and transform the legacy of Rome, acting as a crucial bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. As the 5th century closed, Emperor Zeno, 474-491 CE, faced significant challenges. Religious controversies over the nature of Christ monophysitism versus Chalcedonian orthodoxy divided Eastern Christians, while Isaurian countrymen from Zeno's mountainous homeland dominated the court-breeding resentment among Constantinople's population. Yet the empire remained intact, with efficient tax collection, professional administration, and military security that the fragmented West could only envy. Zeno's successor, Anastasius, year 491-518 CE, provided 27 years of capable governance. His careful financial stewardship replenished the treasury, while his constructions of the Long Walls protected Constantinople's landward approaches from barbarian incursions. Though religious tensions continued during his reign, Anastasius maintained the empire's position against Sassanid Persia, its traditional rival in the east, through a combination of diplomacy and occasional warfare. The golden age of the Eastern Roman Empire, and perhaps its last great attempt at imperial restoration, arrived with the accession of Justinian, 527-565 CE. Born to Latin-speaking peasants in the Balkan provinces, Justinian married the remarkable Theodora, whose journey from actress of questionable reputation to imperial consort scandalized conservative circles, but brought a shrewd and determined partner to the throne. Justinian's ambition was nothing less than the restoration of imperial unity across the entire Roman world. He dispatched his brilliant general Belisarius to recover North Africa from the Vandals. Belisarius accomplished this mission with remarkable speed and efficiency 533-534 CE, returning the wealthy grain-producing region to imperial control. Emboldened by this success, Justinian authorized the invasion of Ostrogothic Italy in 535 CE. The Italian campaign proved far more difficult than anticipated. What was planned as a swift reconquest became a grueling 20-year struggle that devastated the peninsula, cycling between imperial and Gothic control. Though imperial forces eventually prevailed, capturing Ravenna and defeating the last Gothic resistance, 554 CE, the cost was enormous. Italy, once the heart of Roman power, lay economically ruined. Parts of Spain were also recovered, but Justinian's dream of full Western restoration remained elusive as resources were stretched thin by constant warfare. These military campaigns stretched imperial resources already strained by ongoing war with Persia. The situation worsened dramatically when bubonic plague, the plague of Justinian, reached Constantinople in 541 CE, killing perhaps 47% of the city's inhabitants and spreading throughout the Mediterranean basin. This demographic catastrophe reduced tax revenues and military recruitment, creating fiscal problems that would plague Justinian's successors for generations. Despite these challenges, Justinian's reign witnessed truly remarkable achievements. The magnificent church of Hagia Sophia, with its revolutionary dome spanning 108 feet, remains one of the world's architectural marvels, a testament to Byzantine engineering and artistic vision. Even more enduring was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive compilation and reform of Roman law completed under his direction. This monumental legal code preserved classical legal principles for future generations and would eventually form the basis of many European legal systems, representing one of Rome's most significant legacies to the modern world. After Justinian's death, the empire entered a difficult period. His successor, Justin II, lost much of Italy to the Lombards, while warfare with Persia drained resources. Subsequent emperors Tiberius II and Maurice maintained imperial defenses, but struggled with diminishing resources. Maurice's attempts to reform the military led to his overthrow and execution by the usurper Phocas, plunging the empire into further chaos. The 7th century brought unprecedented existential challenges to the empire. Under Shah Khosrow II, Persia launched massive invasions, capturing Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia. Jerusalem fell, and the true cross, most sacred of Christian relics, was carried to the Persian capital as a trophy. Persian forces even reached the Bosporus, directly opposite Constantinople itself. In this moment of supreme crisis emerged one of Rome's greatest emperors, Heraclius, 610-641 CE. Having overthrown the tyrant, Phocas Heraclius personally led the imperial counterattack. In a series of brilliant campaigns, he drove deep into Persian territory, forcing a peace that restored all lost provinces and the true cross. This stunning reversal appeared to secure Rome's eastern frontier permanently. Yet even as Heraclius celebrated his triumph, a new power was emerging in the Arabian desert. United by the Prophet Muhammad and inspired by the new faith of Islam, Arab armies erupted into Roman and Persian territories with astonishing speed and ferocity. The exhausted Persian Empire collapsed entirely, while Roman forces suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Yarmouk, 636 CE. Within a decade, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt provinces that had been Roman for over 6 centuries fell under Islamic rule. This catastrophic loss of territory transformed the empire fundamentally. The remaining realm became more compact, centered on Constantinople, Western Asia Minor, and the southern Balkans. Greek definitively replaced Latin as the language of administration, while the empire took on a more explicitly Christian character. Modern historians often mark this 7th century transformation as the transition from the Eastern Roman to the Byzantine Empire, though contemporaries saw no such division. Despite these massive territorial losses, the empire adapted and survived. The theme system, reorganizing provinces into military districts where soldier farmers defended their own lands, proved an effective response to constant Arab raids. Greek fire, a mysterious incendiary weapon that could burn even on water, gave imperial fleets a crucial advantage in defending Constantinople. When Arab forces besieged Constantinople itself on 2 separate occasions, 674, 678 CE, and 718, 718 CE, the formidable defenses held firm. The failure of these sieges marked a turning point, preserving the empire as a Christian bulwark in the eastern Mediterranean and saving much of Europe from Islamic conquest. The 8th and early 9th centuries brought controversies over religious imagery, known as the iconoclastic period. Emperors from Leo III to Theophilus banned the veneration of icons, viewing them as dangerously close to idol worship. This policy divided society and strained relations with Rome and other Western Christians who continued to use sacred images. The eventual restoration of icons in 843 CE healed these divisions and ushered in a period of cultural and intellectual revival. Under the Macedonian dynasty is 867-1056 CE, founded by Basil I, the empire regained its strength. Agricultural production increased, cities revived, and military fortunes improved. Emperors like Nikephoros Phocas and John Zimisces recaptured territories in Syria, while Basil II, 976-1825 CE, earned the sobriquet Bulgar Slayer for his ruthless campaigns that brought all of the Balkans under imperial rule. This resurgent Rome, albeit Greek in language and culture, represented the most powerful, wealthy, and sophisticated society in the Christian world. Constantinople, with perhaps 500,000 inhabitants, dwarfed the modest towns of Western Europe. Its markets featured goods from as far as China and Scandinavia. Its churches gleamed with mosaics, and its scholars preserved ancient texts unknown in the West. Yet beneath this golden facade, structural weaknesses were developing. The free peasantry that had formed the backbone of the theme armies gradually lost land to expanding aristocratic estates. Civil service positions increasingly became hereditary rather than merit-based. Religious differences with the Latin West widened, culminating in the Great Schism of 1054 CE, which formally divided Christianity into Catholic and Orthodox branches. The pivotal disaster came at Manzikert, 1071 CE, where Seljuk Turks decisively defeated Emperor Romanos III Diogenes and opened Anatolia, the empire's heartland, to Turkish settlement. Simultaneously, Normans conquered the last imperial possessions in Italy, and Pechenegs raided across the Danube. The empire that had seemed triumphant just decades earlier now fought for survival. The desperate appeal for Western aid by Emperor Alexios the Komnenos helped trigger the First Crusade. While Crusaders did establish states in the Holy Land, tensions between Latins and Greeks grew increasingly bitter, fueled by cultural differences and religious intolerance. The Fourth Crusade, 1204 CE, infamously diverted to Constantinople itself, sacking the greatest Christian city in the world and establishing a short-lived Latin empire on its ruins. Though imperial forces recaptured Constantinople under Michael VIII Palaiologos in 1261 CE, the restored empire was but a shadow of its former self. Italian merchant republics has dominated its economy, while Serbian and Bulgarian states carved away Balkan territories. Most importantly, Turkish emirates controlled most of Anatolia, with the aggressive Ottoman state emerging as the greatest threat. The Ottoman Turks gradually encircled Constantinople, crossing into Europe. Despite desperate diplomatic efforts to secure Western aid support proved minimal, Emperor Constantine the Palaiologos faced the massive Ottoman army of Sultan Mehmed II with only a few thousand defenders when the final siege began in April 1453. For 7 weeks, the ancient walls of Constantinople, once impregnable, withstood Ottoman cannon fire. On May 29, 1453, the final assault broke through. Constantine V allegedly threw off his imperial regalia and died fighting alongside his soldiers as the city fell. Mehmed rode to Hagia Sophia, which became a mosque that same day. The Roman Empire, which had endured for 1,080 years since the accession of Augustus, finally ended. Yet its legacy lived on in many forms. The Ottoman sultans styled themselves as Caesars of Rome, ruling much of the former Byzantine territory. Moscow claimed the mantle of the Third Rome, preserving Orthodox Christianity and imperial traditions. Renaissance Italy rediscovered classical texts preserved by Byzantine scholars who fled west before and after Constantinople's fall. Most significantly, the Byzantine Empire had served as the crucial bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. It preserved Roman law, Greek philosophy, and early Christian theology through centuries when these might otherwise have been lost. Its elaborate diplomacy, sophisticated bureaucracy, and complex economy provided models far beyond its borders. The epic story that began with Romulus on the Palatine Hill had finally concluded, but Rome never truly fell. It transformed. Though the last emperor bearing the title of Caesar fell with Constantinople in 1453, Rome's influence echoes through the centuries to our present day. As you drift closer to sleep, let us reflect on the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization that shaped our world in countless ways. Perhaps Rome's most significant contribution lies in the realm of law and governance. The Romans developed a sophisticated legal system that moved far beyond the limited scope of earlier codes to address the complex needs of a diverse cosmopolitan society. Concepts we take for granted in modern legal systems, such as the presumption of innocence, the importance of intent in criminal acts, and the clear distinction between civil and criminal law, all bear distinct Roman fingerprints. Justinian's great legal compilation, the Corpus Juris Civilis, completed in the 6th century CE, preserved these principles through the medieval period and into the modern era. When European nations developed their legal systems, In the late medieval and early modern periods, they drew heavily on this Roman inheritance. Today, the civil law tradition that governs most of continental Europe, Latin America, and parts of Africa and Asia derives directly from Roman models. Even the common law tradition of England and its former colonies, while developing separately absorbed many Roman concepts and terminology. Beyond specific legal provisions, Rome pioneered practices of public administration that would profoundly influence later states. The Romans created a professional civil service, systematic record-keeping, standardized weights and measures, regular censuses, and sophisticated tax systems. While these innovations might seem mundane, they formed the essential infrastructure that allowed complex societies to function on a grand scale. The very idea of citizenship, a formal legal status conferring rights and responsibilities, owes much to Roman practice. Rome's gradual extension of citizenship to conquered peoples offered a pragmatic path to integration that helped sustain the empire for centuries. This model of earned inclusion, though imperfectly implemented and often driven by practical considerations, provided an alternative to the strict ethnic exclusivity that characterized many ancient states, offering a powerful blueprint for future empires and nations. In the realm of language and literature, Rome's impact remains inescapable. Latin, the speech of rustic farmers on the Tiber's banks, miraculously became the lingua franca of Western civilization for over a millennium. Though no longer spoken as a first language, Latin's direct descendants, the Romance languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian, are native tongues for nearly 1 billion people today, a living testament to Rome's linguistic reach. Even languages not directly descended from Latin bear its indelible influence through centuries of borrowing. English, though Germanic in its basic structure, derives roughly 60% of its vocabulary from Latin, either directly or indirectly through French. Scientific, legal, medical, and technical terminology throughout the world remains predominantly Latin-based, providing a common vocabulary across linguistic boundaries that facilitates global communication and scholarship. Roman literature established forms and themes that would resonate through Western literary tradition for ages. Virgil's epic Aeneid, a foundational myth of Roman identity, became a touchstone for later poets from Dante to Milton, shaping the very concept of epic poetry. Ovid's inventive mythological narratives and the metamorphoses filled with transformations and vivid imagery influenced Shakespeare and countless other writers, serving as a vast reservoir of classical stories. Cicero's powerful rhetoric provided timeless models for political oratory and persuasive argument, studied by generations of statesmen and lawyers. Seneca's philosophical works and tragedies shaped Renaissance drama and Stoic thought, offering profound insights into ethics and human nature. The elegant letters of Pliny the Younger and the incisive histories of Tacitus continue to influence how we understand the purpose and methods of these genres, setting standards for historical inquiry and personal correspondence. Through their language and literary forms, the Romans provided a framework for thought and expression that continues to influence how we communicate and understand the world. The physical legacy of Rome remains equally impressive, a testament to their unparalleled ingenuity and practical skill. Roman engineering transformed the Mediterranean landscape with an infrastructure network of unprecedented scale and sophistication. Many Roman roads still form the basis of modern highways, their carefully planned routes proving optimal even with today's technology. These roads, meticulously built and maintained, facilitated not only military movement, but also trade communication and the spread of Roman culture across the empire. Aqueducts, magnificent structures built by Roman engineers, continue to supply fresh water to cities like Segovia in Spain well into the 20th century, demonstrating their incredible durability and foresight. Bridges, dams, and tunnels, often using innovative techniques, further solidified Rome's mastery over its environment. Roman architectural innovations, particularly their refinement of the arch vault and dome, made possible buildings of scale and permanence previously unimaginable. Their development of concrete, a revolutionary building material that was strong, durable, and versatile, allowed for structures that have endured 2 millennia of earthquakes, floods, and warfare. The Pantheon in Rome, with its perfect concrete dome featuring an oculus, an open circular hole open to the sky, remains one of the world's architectural marvels, inspiring buildings from the Renaissance to the present day. The Colosseum, a vast amphitheater, stands as a symbol of Roman ambition and engineering prowess, capable of hosting tens of thousands of spectators. Across the empire, public baths, basilicas, theaters, and forums were built, demonstrating a commitment to urban life and civic amenities that was unparalleled in the ancient world. These structures were not just functional, they were statements of power, culture, and innovation that continue to inspire awe. In military affairs, Rome's legacy is similarly profound and enduring. The legion, a flexible, highly organized, and professional fighting force, provided a model that would influence armed forces for centuries. Combining disciplined heavy infantry with specialized units like cavalry, artillery, and engineers, the legion was capable of adapting to diverse terrains and opponents. Roman emphasis on disciplined training, engineering, and logistics, rather than mere courage or numbers, set standards that later successful armies would emulate. Roman military camps, built with remarkable speed and precision, showcased their organizational genius. Their siege engines, naval tactics, and frontier defenses demonstrated a comprehensive approach to warfare. Military academies today still study Caesar's campaigns as exemplars of strategic and tactical brilliance, dissecting his maneuvers, his innovative use of fortifications, and his psychological warfare. The Roman military's ability to conquer and hold vast territories for centuries is a testament to its organizational genius and adaptability, providing a blueprint for the projection of power that continues to be studied and admired. Rome's political legacy presents a more complex, multifaceted picture. The Republic, with its intricate system of checks and balances, separation of powers, and term limits, profoundly influenced the framers of many modern constitutions, most notably America's founders, who consciously studied Roman precedents to avoid both monarchy and mob rule. Yet Rome also tragically demonstrated how even robust republican institutions could be subverted by ambitious individuals, and how liberty might be traded for the promise of security and stability. The imperial system that replaced the republic similarly offered both positive and negative lessons for later generations. At its best, the Roman Empire provided remarkable good governance, security, and prosperity to diverse populations across 3 continents, creating an era of peace and stability that was unprecedented. At its worst, it demonstrated the dangers of autocracy, the corrupting influence of absolute power, and the perennial challenges of maintaining unity across vast territories and different cultures. Christianity, the world's largest religion, owes its global spread significantly to the Roman context in which it developed. Early Christians shrewdly utilized Roman road ships and bustling urban networks to disseminate their message across the empire. After Constantine's conversion, the imperial administrative framework provided a direct template for ecclesiastical organization, with dioceses often corresponding to Roman provincial boundaries. Even the title Pontifex Maximus, once held by Roman emperors as chief priests of the state religion, later passed to the popes who led the Catholic Church, illustrating the profound institutional continuity. Rome's profound cultural achievement lay not just in its original contributions, but in its unparalleled genius for synthesis and transmission. Roman artists, philosophers, and scientists often adapted Greek models, but in doing so they preserved and transmitted Greek achievements to later civilizations. Without Rome as intermediary, much of classical Greek thought its philosophy, literature, and science might have been lost to the Western tradition forever, especially during the intellectual dormancy of the early Middle Ages. Rome acted as a vast cultural filter and amplifier, absorbing, adapting, and then rebroadcasting the intellectual heritage of the ancient world. The idea of Rome itself became a powerful symbol, a beacon of order and civilization, long after the empire's political fall. Throughout the medieval and early modern periods, political leaders across Europe and beyond sought to claim the Roman mantle. Charlemagne's coronation as Roman emperor in 800 CE, the Byzantine rulers' steadfast identity as Romaioi, the Russian czars claimed to be heirs of the Third Rome, and the sprawling Habsburg Holy Roman Empire all reflect Rome's potent symbolic legacy, a desire to inherit its authority and prestige. Even modern movements sadly have sometimes misused Roman imperial grandeur, as seen in the conscious evocation of Roman symbolism by Nazi architecture and Mussolini's fascist imagery, showing the persistent, if sometimes distorted, power of Roman symbolism. Perhaps most fundamentally, Rome bequeathed to later civilizations a cosmopolitan vision, the radical idea that diverse peoples could participate in a shared cultural and political community while maintaining aspects of their distinct identities. Though imperfectly realized in practice, this Roman ideal of a world brought together under common law and shared citizenship, rather than divided by strict ethnic or religious boundaries, remains a powerful aspiration in our own increasingly interconnected global society. It offered a blueprint for inclusion and integration that stood in stark contrast to many earlier, more insular ancient states. Rome also demonstrated both the heights humanity can achieve and the depths to which it can sink. The same civilization that produced the profound wisdom of Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations also featured the grotesque excesses and cruelties of Caligula and Nero. The society that built the awe-inspiring Pantheon, a marvel of architectural harmony, also staged the brutal gladiatorial games spectacles of violence that chill us even today. This complex legacy reminds us that human achievements are always mixed with human failings, that civilization itself is always both inspiring and flawed, a continuous interplay of progress and regression. As you fall deeper into sleep, imagine how different our world would be without Rome's enduring influence. Our legal systems and the very language of our laws, the foundational grammar of our languages, our monumental architecture, and the ingenious engineering that surrounds us, our political institutions, and the organizational structures of our religious bodies, all would be profoundly transformed without the Roman experience. From mundane details, like the names of our months, to profound questions about citizenship governance and the nature of Empire Rome, has shaped how we understand ourselves and our society in countless, often unseen ways. The Roman story, spanning more than 2 millennia from Romulus to the fall of Constantinople, offers a grand epic of human achievement, resilience, and adaptation. Through rises and falls, triumphs, and disasters, the Roman world evolved while remarkably maintaining connections to its past. Even after the empire ceased to exist as a political entity in the West, its shadow continued to influence everything that followed. As you drift off to sleep, take comfort in this continuity of human experience. The same stars that shone over Augustus as he transformed Rome from brick to marble now shine on us. The same human hopes, fears, and dreams that motivated Romans for security, prosperity, meaning, and beauty motivate us still. In that shared humanity lies perhaps Rome's most profound and comforting legacy of all. As our journey through the Roman Empire gently draws to a close, let the echoes of its magnificent story begin to fade into the quiet comfort of your mind. Picture the grand arches, now softened by time, blending into the twilight. Feel the ancient roads beneath your feet, their endless paths dissolving into the mists of history. The passionate debates of the Forum, the thunder of the legions, the brilliance of emperors, all these vibrant memories now drift away like shadows stretching long and then disappearing with the setting sun. You've explored over 1,000 years of human ambition, ingenuity, and resilience. You've witnessed the birth of laws that still guide us, words that still resonate in our tongues, and structures that still inspire awe. Allow these profound connections to settle deeply within you, not as facts to be remembered, but as threads woven into the fabric of human experience. The legacy of Rome isn't just in dusty books or crumbling stones. It's in the very flow of our modern world, a quiet, persistent current beneath the surface. Let the weight of history lift, leaving only a sense of profound peace. Imagine the ancient Romans, just like us, seeking comfort, dreaming of prosperity, and finding beauty in their world. We are all connected by this shared human journey. As the last whispers of the past grow silent, know that you are drifting safely into the tranquility of the present moment. Sweet dreams.